Rick Ross just put a $50,000 bounty on the entire Miami rap scene, and within 48 hours, what was supposed to be a feel-good freestyle challenge detonated into the messiest, most personal, most instantly viral credibility trial that hip-hop has produced all year. And I need you to lock in right now, because by the end of this video, you are going to understand that this was never about the money. It was never about a trophy, even though the trophy is a triple Whopper with cheese, and yes, we are absolutely going to talk about that. This is about power. This is about history. This is about a man who once signed away 6 albums and half of his publishing for $30,000, turning around 2 decades later, looking the next generation dead in the eye, and saying, "I don't want your publishing. I don't want your soul. I just want to watch you shine." And somehow, some way, there are still people trying to turn that into a scandal. Now, as far as Rick Ross goes, before we step into the story we are about to dive into, if you believe Miami needed this, if you believe the 305 deserved a moment where the biggest boss in the city put real money behind real talent, well, leave a like right now, because one like is one ticket onto the boat, and if you hype it up, you just doubled the prize money in spirit, and you also just doubled the chances that one of these porch critics typing from their mama's Wi-Fi ever steps on a stage, in front of actual power players. Go ahead. I'll wait. Okay, so here is the good news first, because there is good news, and then there is the part of the story that made my timeline look like a crime scene. The good news is simple, and it's beautiful, and it's the kind of headline hip-hop doesn't get enough of. Rick Ross, the boss, the biggest belly in the building, the man with an estimated empire north of $150 million, has officially taken what started as a $15,000 local freestyle challenge and jacked it all the way up to 50 bands. $50,000. Cash. For one rapper. One winner. One freestyle standing above the rest. And look, I know in an era where labels are handing out 360-degree handcuffs and calling them opportunities, $50,000 with no strings attached sounds like a typo. But it's real. The boat said it. The boat is docked. And if you know, you know. Now, because the details here matter, and because half the internet is already getting them wrong on purpose, let's walk through exactly what Rick Ross announced, because the announcement itself is a masterclass. Ross said it plain. The challenge that was sitting at 15,000 is now at 50. He said he wants to see the winner perform at a private location, in front of actual power players, the kind of people who can change your life with one phone call. He said he's linking up with the judges at the South Beach Brewery, Papa, Jelly, Big Money Sonny, going over the details, and that by Thursday morning, the whole city would know what the play is. He said he wants to give it 2 weeks, not to stall, but to invite executives, local tastemakers, streamers, to build the biggest platform an independent Miami rapper could ever dream of standing on. And then he said the part that should be printed on a billboard on I-95. When I signed my deal, I got 30 grand for 6 albums and half of my publishing. I don't want your publishing. I want you to invest in yourself. I want you to take this further than Ricky Rosie or anybody ever could. Read that back. Slowly. Because that is not a contest announcement. That is a man publicly handing back everything the industry took from him, in cash, on camera, in front of the entire city. But here's the thing, and this is where I need everybody to actually sit with what we're watching, because context is everything in a story like this. To understand why $50,000 from Rick Ross hits different than $50,000 from literally anybody else in rap, you have to understand what Rick Ross actually is in 2026. Because there is a version of this story where a rapper throws some money at a contest for attention, gets his little headline, and disappears. That is not this. Not even close. Let's just run the numbers, because the numbers are absurd. Rick Ross is sitting on an estimated net worth of around $150 million. This is a man who owns the largest single-family home in the entire state of Georgia, a 235-acre estate with 109 rooms, a bowling alley, and a horse stable, a property so massive it literally doubled as a movie palace. This is a man whose car collection alone is worth over $5 million, from a million-plus Bugatti down to the classic Chevys. This is a man who looked at the fast food business and said, "Fine, I'll just own the block," and stacked up more than 30 Wingstop franchises, turning lemon pepper into generational wealth. And when this man travels, he doesn't charter. He said it himself, he refused to charter a plane until he could buy his own, and now he's floating in a G550 with a bed in the back, 2 restrooms, upgraded with Starlink internet, because apparently when Rick Ross takes off, the phone call doesn't stop. $500,000 of internet. $700,000 total on the setup. And when the interviewer Googled him and said the search said his net worth was $20 million, Ross just laughed. Duh. Because the internet has been lowballing this man for a decade while he quietly built an empire. I'm laying all of this out for one reason and one reason only. When a man operating at that altitude stops, turns around, and reaches all the way down into the local freestyle circuit of his own city, the city that made him, the city he's been repping for over 20 years, that is not a publicity move. That is a king holding court. Rick Ross has spent 2 decades building the kind of platform where one cosign, one repost, one appearance can redirect an entire career, and instead of selling access to that platform, instead of charging for it the way the industry taught him the game was played, he is literally paying $50,000 of his own money for the privilege of giving it away. And I want to be really precise about this next part, because this is where the story stops being cute and starts being important. Ross didn't just raise the prize. He restructured the entire meaning of the event. He said he wants the winner performing at a private location in front of power players. Do you understand what that sentence is worth to an independent artist? $50,000 is life-changing money, sure. Pay off the car, fix the crib, fund the studio time, shoot the videos. But a room full of executives and tastemakers watching you perform, with the biggest boss in Miami standing there vouching for the whole event? That's not money. That's access. That's the thing you cannot buy. Artists spend entire careers and sign horrific contracts trying to buy their way into that exact room, and Rick Ross just made the cover charge a freestyle. This is the part where I have to say it, because somebody has to. In an industry where the standard move is to extract from young artists, where the headline story of the last 20 years has been executives and stars alike finding newer and more creative ways to own pieces of kids they didn't raise and work they didn't do, Rick Ross stood on camera and ran the entire playbook in reverse. He told the story on himself. 30 grand. 6 albums. Half his publishing. Gone. He lived the worst version of the deal so the next kid from the 305 wouldn't have to, and now he's spending 50 bands to make sure at least one of them starts from a position of power instead of a position of debt. That's not a challenge. That's a correction. And the city felt it immediately. The second that announcement hit, the Miami 50K Challenge stopped being a local freestyle contest floating around online and became the loudest conversation in the city's rap scene. Entries started flooding in. Local pages started reposting clips. Timelines turned into debate stages, everybody arguing about who had the hardest verse, who actually deserved the money, who was really up next out of the 305. Some artists were clearly chasing the bag, and, honestly, respect. $50,000 is $50,000. But others were chasing something bigger, the chance to stand out while the whole city, and increasingly the whole internet, was watching. Either way, Rick Ross had raised the temperature of Miami hip-hop without releasing a single track. Think about how rare that is. Think about how few artists alive can do that. Now, if the story ended there, this would be a beautiful video, we'd all feel great, and I'd see you in the next one. But you already know it doesn't end there. You clicked on this video. You saw the title. So let's get into it, because here is where a feel-good story about money and opportunity turned into something a whole lot messier, a whole lot more personal, and a whole lot more revealing about the unwritten rules that still run rap culture in 2026. Because before Rick Ross ever put $50,000 on the table, this challenge already had a pulse. It already had a name attached to it, a history attached to it, and whether anybody wanted to admit it or not, tension attached to it. And the moment that money went up, all of that buried tension came crawling straight to the surface, like it had been waiting for the spotlight the whole time. So let's rewind. Let's go back to before the 50 bands, before the brewery meeting, before the triple Whopper with cheese, and talk about where this thing actually started, and who was holding it when the boss pulled up. Now, because I know some of you came here from outside the 305 and you're wondering why this specific man doing this specific thing matters so much, let's build the full picture, because Rick Ross's relationship with Miami is not a footnote in this story. It is the story. This is a man who came up in Carroll City, who put the 305 on his back before the industry believed a Miami rapper could carry a mainstream career on his own terms, and who then spent the next 20 years refusing to let the city leave his name no matter how high the altitude got. The mansion is in Georgia. The jet is in the sky. The franchises are everywhere. But the identity never left Dade County. And that's why, when Miami's local scene produced a little spark of energy with a $15,000 challenge, the biggest boss in the city's history didn't just notice it. He absorbed it, amplified it, and handed it back to the city wearing a crown. And there's a business layer to this that deserves real attention, because Rick Ross didn't just get rich. He got rich in a very specific way that explains everything about how this challenge was structured. This is the founder of Maybach Music Group, a man who built an entire label imprint, who signed and developed other artists, who has sat on both sides of the contract table. He knows exactly where the traps are in this business because he's seen every single one of them from every angle, as the artist getting squeezed, as the executive holding the pen, and as the entrepreneur who ultimately decided the safest contract is the one you write yourself. That's why the no publishing, no strings framing of this challenge wasn't some throwaway line. It was a thesis statement from a man who has processed every way the game separates young artists from their futures and chose to build a moment with none of those mechanisms attached. 0. The winner gets money, a stage, a room, and their freedom. In 2026, that combination is so rare it basically qualifies as a historical event. And let's talk about the performance itself, the private location, the power players, because I don't think people fully grasp what Ross is constructing here. This isn't a showcase where 100 hopefuls rap at a distracted crowd of bloggers. He's talking about a curated room. Executives. Tastemakers. Streamers. The kind of gathering where one performance becomes one connection, becomes one door that was never going to open any other way. Ross even said he wants to sit back, sip his Luc Belair, his bamboo, sip it like a boss, and watch. Picture that scene. The biggest name in Miami rap history, posted up, drink in hand, while the next generation performs for the people who decide futures. That's not a contest finale. That's a coronation he engineered and then paid for. And the only price of admission was being the hardest voice in a city full of them. Here's the other thing that makes this moment land so heavy. Miami hip-hop has spent years in a weird spot. The city produces stars, the city produces sounds, the city produces culture that the entire industry mines relentlessly, and yet the local scene itself, the actual circuit of artists grinding in the 305 right now, rarely gets a moment where the whole machine points at them at once. The industry takes Miami's flavor and leaves Miami's artists. And Ross just reversed the flow. For at least a few weeks, because one man decided to make it so, the entire attention economy of rap is pointed directly at unknown rappers in Miami, Florida. Ask yourself how many artists alive could do that with one announcement. Then ask yourself how many would. The answer to the first question is a handful. The answer to the second question is apparently one. So here's the origin, and pay attention to how small it starts, because that's what makes everything that follows so unbelievable. From everything that's been shared publicly around this challenge, the whole thing appears to have started as a $15,000 Miami rap competition associated with Freezy. 15 grand. And let's be clear, 15 grand is serious money for a freestyle challenge, especially for independent rappers looking for any opening to get their name buzzing. At that level, local artists were already paying attention. Verses were already being recorded. The machine was already moving. But then Rick Ross entered the conversation, and the entire scale of the thing changed overnight. Rick Ross didn't just co-sign the challenge. He didn't just repost it and keep it moving like a bigger artist lending a little shine. He tripled the stakes with his own money and then some, pushing the prize from $15,000 all the way to $50,000, and in doing so, he turned a local contest into a statement about the Miami rap scene itself. At that point, this wasn't just another challenge where somebody records a verse, posts it online, and hopes people notice. The bigger prize brought a bigger spotlight, and the bigger spotlight brought everything else that was lurking underneath. And this is where I need you to understand the geometry of what happened next, because two competitions started running at the exact same time. On the surface, you had the official one, rappers dropping their hardest freestyles, chasing $50,000 and a performance slot in front of power players. But underneath that, a second competition kicked off, one with no prize money and no judges, where the currency was reputation, history, and the oldest, most dangerous word in hip-hop, credibility. And once that second competition started, it began swallowing the first one whole. Because the talk surrounding the challenge started drifting away from who had the strongest verse, and another layer of tension crept into the story. Suddenly people weren't only discussing flows and punchlines. They were paying attention to the personalities connected to how this challenge came together in the first place. And that's where two names get pulled into the center of this thing, two names with deep Miami roots and even deeper history, and the second those names entered the chat, the temperature went from warm to nuclear. The first name is Brisco. Now, if you know Miami rap, you know Brisco. Flo Rida's former artist, a real one from the city's golden mixtape era, a man whose name carries legitimate weight in the 305. And the second name is Freezy, tied to the origins of the challenge itself. And here's where it gets crazy, because the conversation around a freestyle contest suddenly detoured into a courtroom from nearly 2 decades ago, and an old wound got ripped wide open in front of the entire internet. Now I'm going to handle this next section carefully, because it deserves precision, not gossip. Here's what's publicly documented. Years ago, Brisco was the victim of an armed robbery, chain snatched, pistol involved, the whole nightmare. 3 men from North Miami were ultimately convicted in connection with that robbery, and Brisco testified at trial, identifying a suspect, and those men received enormous sentences, decades upon decades behind bars. That's the record. That's the history. And for years, that history followed him, because in certain corners of rap culture, there is no statute of limitations on the word they tried to pin on him. And when the Miami 50K challenge started heating up, that history came roaring back. Brisco's name got pulled into the conversation, old interview clips started recirculating, people started litigating a 2-decade-old courtroom all over again on social media, and the debate split exactly the way it always splits. On one side, people treating that old situation like it's still the defining fact of a man's life. On the other side, people asking why a victim identifying the men who robbed him at gunpoint should be treated as a crime at all, and why a chapter that old is being dragged into a modern rap competition in the first place. And listen, that second question is a real one. Because let's be honest about what happened in that courtroom. A man got robbed at gunpoint. His chains were taken. His life was threatened. And when the system asked him to point at who did it, he pointed. Now, you can argue about street codes until the end of time, and trust me, the internet did exactly that all week, but there's a version of this conversation that never gets had. And it's the version where we ask why the man who got victimized is the one carrying the jacket 20 years later, while the culture just shrugs at the men who did the robbing. But that's the debate that swallowed the challenge, and it was only getting started. Now let's slow down and look at the timeline, because the speed of the escalation is its own story, and it's the part that tells you the most about where rap culture is right now. Day 1. A $15,000 challenge associated with Freezy is bubbling locally. Artists are recording entries, pages are posting clips, everything is about the music. Then Ross announces the raise to $50,000, and for about a heartbeat, everything is still beautiful. The city is celebrating. The entries multiply. The energy is pure. And then the gravity of old history took over. Because here's what happens when you concentrate that much attention on one local scene. Every unresolved tension inside that scene gets magnified along with everything else. The spotlight doesn't just illuminate talent. It illuminates grudges, history, paperwork, everything. And Miami, like every rap city in America, has plenty of all 3 sitting right under the surface. So once the money made the whole world look, the whole world started seeing things that had nothing to do with freestyles, and the conversation forked into the 2 tracks we talked about, the competition for the cash, and the far uglier competition over credibility. And I want to stay fair here, because this is exactly the kind of moment where commentary channels lose the plot. So let's be precise about the 2 sides of the Brisco debate, because both of them were loud and neither of them was small. The first side said the street code is the street code, that testifying is testifying, and that the culture's oldest rule doesn't come with an expiration date just because 2 decades passed. The second side said, hold on, we are really doing this? A man was robbed at gunpoint, held a pistol to his life, watched people take decades of prison time for it, and the everlasting shame belongs to the victim who identified them? That side pointed out, correctly, that this entire framework only exists in rap, that no other genre or profession on earth punishes the victim of a violent crime for cooperating with the system that prosecuted it, and that maybe, just maybe, a culture that protects the robbers and buries the robbed has the whole thing upside down. I'm not going to tell you which side won, because neither did. That's the point. That's why it consumed the internet for days. Because this argument is older than everybody having it, it has never been resolved, and every few years the culture finds a new stage to have it on. This time, the stage just happened to be a $50,000 freestyle challenge, which might be the most 2026 sentence ever written. And here's the layer nobody talked about while the debate raged: the artists. Because while the timeline was busy relitigating 2007, actual rappers were in actual studios and on actual porches writing the verses of their lives, chasing a prize that was now wrapped in the biggest spotlight Miami scene has had in years. Every day the drama continued. The value of winning went up because the audience got bigger. The chaos was free marketing. The tension was a billboard. And whether anybody intended it or not, the Miami 50K challenge became the rare rap story where the music, the money, the history, and the morality play all collided into one event that everybody in the culture now has an opinion about. So when people ask why this story matters, that's the answer. It's not the 50 grand, though the 50 grand is beautiful. It's not the courtroom history, though that debate will outlive all of us. It's that for 1 week in 2026, all of it, the generosity, the grudges, the codes, the contradictions, the whole beautiful mess of what hip-hop actually is, played out at full volume in one city, around one challenge. Because one boss decided to dock the boat and put his money where his legend is. And the wildest part? The actual competition hasn't even happened yet. Because once Brisco's history became part of the discussion, the Miami 50K challenge wasn't only about who could spit the best freestyle anymore. The spotlight had swung toward personal history, reputation, and the unwritten laws people never stop arguing about inside hip-hop culture. And then Freezy stepped directly into the fire, and an already tense conversation got a whole lot louder. According to the accusations and claims circulating publicly on social media around the challenge, Freezy pushed back at Ross and raised allegations of his own concerning the Miami superstar. And I want to be crystal clear here, because this matters. Those claims should be treated exactly as what they are, public allegations, not proven facts. I'm not here to convict anybody, and neither are you. But online, the distinction didn't stop anybody from picking sides, digging into history, and turning a freestyle challenge into a full-blown Miami rap dispute playing out in front of everybody. And then came the moment that took this whole thing from messy to unforgettable, because Rick Ross, from Marbella, Spain, mind you, posted up in paradise and decided to address the situation directly. And what followed was one of the coldest, most surgical public responses I have ever seen a rapper deliver, and I need to walk through it carefully, because every line of it was engineered. Ross opened by saying he never had an issue with the man. Never even really spoke to him about anything. And then he said the line that told everybody exactly how this was going to go. You want the attention. And now you have it. Let that sit for a second, because that's not an insult. That's a diagnosis. That's a man with 2 decades in this game identifying the entire motivation behind the noise in one sentence and then granting the wish in the most devastating way possible. You wanted eyes on you? Here. Have all of them. Have every single one of them at once on my terms. And then Ross did the thing that separates a boss from everybody else in the room. He didn't rant. He didn't threaten. He told a story about accountability. He brought up that old courtroom, the George Jefferson walk, the 90 years handed down, the chains with the fake diamonds, and he did it with a specificity that told everybody watching that this wasn't new information to him. This was a file he'd been holding. And the message underneath every word was the same. You don't speak on Ross and Ross business without knowing the whole board, because Ross has been playing this game longer than you've been watching it. And look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend every part of that response was comfortable to watch. It wasn't. It was raw, it was personal. It dragged family and history and 20-year-old paperwork into the middle of what was supposed to be a celebration of Miami talent. And people were split right down the middle on it. Half the timeline said Ross was defending his name and his city the way a boss has to when the subliminals start flying. The other half asked why the biggest moment of generosity in Miami rap all year needed a public execution stapled to it. Both of those takes have a logic to them, and, honestly, the fact that both can be true at once is exactly what makes this story so big. Because here's the deeper play that I think a lot of people missed while they were busy picking sides. Look at what the chaos actually did. The back and forth didn't kill the challenge. It supercharged it. Every reply, every repost, every heated debate about credibility and courtrooms, and who said what, all of it funneled more eyes onto the Miami 50K challenge. A local freestyle contest was suddenly a national conversation about money, loyalty, history, and the rules of the culture, with Rick Ross's name sitting right at the center of all of it. You cannot buy that kind of attention. Well, actually, apparently you can. It costs about $50,000 and 1 triple Whopper with cheese. And yeah, let's talk about the Whopper, because it's not a joke. It's the thesis of this entire story. Ross said it himself. He wants to see the winner hold that triple Whopper with cheese up. He said ain't nothing like spanking the haters with that Whopper and cheese. Now, on the surface, that's a funny flex from a man who's been synonymous with a certain fast food empire his whole career. But think about what that trophy actually is. It's not a chain. It's not a plaque. It's not something a label can repossess or a contract can reclaim. It's a burger. It's ridiculous. It's perfect. It's a $50,000 moment reduced to the most Miami, most Rick Ross symbol imaginable, a prize that says the money was real, the moment was real, and none of it came with paperwork. There's a whole generation of artists holding plaques they don't own from deals they regret. This winner is going to hold a burger they ate, cash they keep, and footage nobody can take from them. That is not a gimmick. That is the most honest trophy in rap. And one more thing before we get to the finale, because this detail deserves its own moment. Think about what the judges' table represents here. Ross named them on camera Papa, Jelly, Big Money Sonny, meeting at the South Beach Brewery, going over the details, and he invited the whole city to swing by. Now, in the standard celebrity playbook, that meeting happens behind closed doors in a boardroom with publicists. Ross put the address on the internet. That is either the most trusting move a boss has ever made or the most confident one, and knowing this man's career, it's the confidence. Because everything about how Rick Ross has handled this challenge says the same thing. He is not protecting the moment, he is sharing it. The meeting is public. The money is public. The platform is public. The only thing private is the final performance, and even that is private for a reason, because that room is the prize, and prizes are supposed to be earned. There's also a business lesson hiding in plain sight that the hustle culture corners of the internet actually picked up on faster than the rap pages did. Look at how Ross structured the rollout. He didn't dump everything at once. He announced the raise first, let the number detonate, then layered in the judges, the brewery, the timeline, the 2-week build, the private location. Every announcement extended the news cycle. Every detail gave the blogs and the pages something new to run with. That is a man who has spent 20 years studying how attention works, applying every single lesson to somebody else's moment. Artists pay consultants 6 figures for rollouts less disciplined than what Rick Ross just did for free for a bunch of rappers he's never met. And when the challenge wraps, every one of those lessons, the staging, the pacing, the escalation, the finale, becomes a template the whole local scene can steal. That's the part of the gift nobody's counting. He's not just giving away $50,000. He's giving away the playbook. Now, I know what some of the critics are already typing, so let's just handle it head-on, because the pushback writes itself. The cynics look at this whole thing and they see a rich man buying goodwill, a superstar laundering his name through the struggle, a contest that's really just content, a king performing generosity for the camera. And you know what? I hear it. I've been covering this game long enough to know that the camera changes everybody's behavior. But here's the problem with that take, and it's a problem big enough to drive a G550 through. Rick Ross didn't need this. Say it out loud. A man with $150 million empire, a private jet with Starlink, the biggest house in Georgia, and 30-plus franchises does not need a local freestyle challenge for attention. If Rick Ross wanted headlines, he could post a video from the hangar and get 1 million views talking about his beds and his bathrooms. He could announce a Wingstop flavor. He could do literally anything. Instead, he chose the single most expensive, most labor-intensive, most goodwill-dependent way to make news, giving his own money to unknown rappers from his own city, with no ownership stake, no publishing clause, no album commitment, nothing. If that's a publicity stunt, it's the worst structured publicity stunt in history, because the only guaranteed return on this investment is watching somebody else win. And that right there is the part the cynics can't metabolize. Because the entire architecture of modern rap stardom is built on leverage. Get the young artist to need you. Get them signed. Get a piece. Get paid for ever off work they did in a weekend. And Rick Ross, who knows that machinery better than almost anyone alive, who lived inside it, who paid $30,000 for 6 albums tuition to learn it, walked up to that machinery and threw sand in the gears on camera. I don't want your publishing. Invest in yourself. Take it further than Ricky Rosie ever could. Those aren't the words of a man running a play. Those are the words of a man closing a loop that's been open since the day he signed his own bad deal. And let's zoom out even further, because this is bigger than Miami now. Look at the moment hip-hop is in. The biggest stories of the last 2 years have been wars. Civil wars between superstars, label wars, lawsuits, diss tracks, fan armies tearing each other apart in every comment section on Earth. The culture has been eating itself, and the algorithm has been serving the meal. And right in the middle of all that noise, one of the most famous bosses in the history of the genre stands up and says, "Forget all of that. Here's $50,000. Show me who's next." Whatever else you want to say about the story, whatever side you took in the debates it sparked, that is a different frequency. That is a man using the loudest currency he has, attention, to point at the future instead of the feud. And the ripple effects are already visible. Every local scene in America watched this. Every rapper grinding in a city without a Ross watched this. And the bar got moved. Because now the question every artist with a platform is going to get asked, fairly or unfairly, is simple. Ross put up 50 bands and asked for nothing back. What's your city getting from you? That's the standard now. That's the challenge inside the challenge. And nobody in the industry is going to say it out loud, but a lot of very comfortable superstars did not love seeing that bar get set, because generosity that public makes everybody else's silence a little louder. Now here's where we are, and here's what's coming. The judges are meeting. The details are being locked in. Ross said it himself. He's giving it a couple of weeks, 2 weeks maybe, to stack the room with executives, tastemakers, streamers, to build the biggest platform the winner could possibly stand on. Which means the clock is ticking, the entries are flying, and somewhere in Miami right now, there's a rapper writing the verse that's going to change their life, and they don't even know it yet. And when that private performance happens, when the winner stands in that room in front of the power players and holds that triple Whopper with cheese up over their head, that's not the end of the story. That's the first chapter of somebody else's. And me? I'll be watching. Because in a year where hip-hop gave us so many reasons to cover the wars, it's worth showing up in full for the one time a boss covered the tab instead. The boat said it. The boat is docked. $50,000, one winner, no strings, and a city that just got reminded what it looks like when somebody who made it actually reaches back. Whatever happens next, Miami already won something here. The only question left is who's going to win everything else. So, with the whole board laid out, sound off. What do you think about Rick Ross turning a $15,000 local challenge into a $50,000 coronation? Was the public response to the drama the right move from a boss defending his name, or should the moment have stayed purely about the music? And most importantly, who out of the 305 do you think is really walking away with that 50 bands and that triple Whopper with cheese? Drop every single one of your thoughts in the comments, because I read them all, and this one is going to be a debate for weeks. And listen, if you made it all the way to this point in the video, thank you, seriously. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hype the video up while you're at it. It really does make a huge difference, and I can't thank you enough for the support. And if you want to see what happened before this, well, there's a whole other storm brewing involving one of the biggest names in the game and a private jet situation that is somehow even crazier than 50 grand and a burger. And I don't think they're going to be able to finish what they started. Well, really, check that one out and let me know your thoughts on the video after, because it's something a little different. I'll see you there.